What's going on, everyone? So today we got a very special one. As the title suggests, we're doing some blue Luke, mono blue Luke, or Bluke if you want to get fancy with it. This is a pretty sweet deck, really powerful against the aggro and even some of the mid-range decks, and we're going to dive into the whole list today. If you want to pick up this list or any of the cards associated with Star Wars Unlimited, I'll have a deck list down below, as well as a link to my TCG player link, so you guys can pick up the cards using that link and help me out as well as help yourself out. But let's not waste any time and let's talk about the list. Starting us off with the leader and the base and a little bit of the reasons as to why I went with double blue. So Luke here, his action is pretty relevant to the deck, as there are a lot of units that you do want to protect, but you don't necessarily want to play off curve in order for you to get the shield unit. His action ability does help out some of those units that you play a little bit, well, later in the game that you would have played early by giving them a little bit of a power boost in that shield token. But there's not many scenarios where I don't play a unit because I want that shield token. Player units as they are supposed to, and sometimes you get a little bit of extra value. On the other hand, his flip side can really change the game for you, as there are a lot of ways to get sentinels on the battlefield, or to actually just have a sentinel on the battlefield when Luke deploys. That's a pretty strong unit, and so you could actually just attack with this guy, control the board potentially, or just hit face and give those units that do have sentinel that shield token, which is pretty relevant. Him being a 4/7 on the flip side, as well as having that force tag, is pretty relevant in this deck, and he usually won't die immediately. Now, he does die immediately to an ECL'd out steadfast battalion or something like that, but there are a lot of ways to make sure that he's going to live when he flips over. And even in the case there you can't really protect him, he is just a 4/7, so he can survive on his own oftentimes, or even just trade with units. That does end up being pretty nice. Now, why blue paired with Luke, who's already the vigilance aspect? As many times you're going to see Luke green, that's probably the most popular, but you even sometimes see Luke red, and then very rarely you see Luke yellow. So the reason why we're playing Luke blue today is, of course, to leverage, well, one, vigilance. As a 4-costed event, it gives you a really nice plan against the controlling decks, as you can actually just play their game, especially when we get to sideboarding. But it also just gives you a massive game against the aggro matchup, where you can actually have a ton of healing main deck to get through all of the aggression that you're fighting, which Luke green sometimes has a bit of trouble against. On the other hand, we are also playing with Protector, and this is a pretty sweet 1-costed upgrade in double vigilance that gives your unit sentinel and +1/+1. Now, that is huge when you're coming up against the mid-range and aggro decks alongside vigilance. This Protector can really screw people up, as many of you have realized how powerful something like a Child Sin is. Well, imagine if you get a Yoda out, get it upgraded, put a Sentinel on it, boom, suddenly that's a really big problem for them to deal with. So I've been really impressed with both Protector and, of course, Vigilance, and those are some of the reasons why we're playing double blue Luke, as those are really the things that we're getting out of the aspect reduction with the additional blue resources. So with that said, let's talk about the events and upgrades that we're playing and some of the reasons why Vigilance and Protector are so powerful. So as you might have noticed, I've moved up the quantity number of the cards on these bottom ones, as they are upgrades. So I figured you guys would want to see the actual stats they give, and then I will just talk a little bit about the way they work, because it is covering a little bit of that. However, starting us off here, we have 1 copy of Restock. As I mentioned, we are really good against the aggro and pretty good against the mid-range matchups. One style of deck that we struggle a decent amount against are the controlling decks. So that's going to be Vader Blue. Mainly, it could be Boba Blue a little bit, but that one we have some more game against. And then Iden Blue. Those are kind of the matchups that I'm considering with Restock. So having 1 copy of Restock main deck actually give us a real chance of potentially milling out our opponent, which is what they're going to probably try to do against us, as we're somewhat of a soft control deck. We're more mid-rangey, but we are capable of removing a lot of units. Seeing as our second one we got to talk about is 2 copies of Make an Opening. This is really, really powerful, especially with some of the other upgrades that we got going on in the deck, but also just gives us a couple more options in the earlier stages of the game for some early removal with healing to our base. 3 copies of Takedown. This is just one of the most powerful vigilance removal spells in the entire game. It helps you deal with some of the leaders coming down immediately, such as Sabine, such as Chirrut, but it also just kills off really important units that your opponents may have, as it deals with a lot because of that 5 or less remaining HP. 3 copies of Vigilance. This is one of the core reasons why so many decks are now dipping into blue. It's for Vigilance. Normally, this card is going to be a heal 5, defeat a unit with 3 or less remaining HP. Really good against any mid-range, really good against any aggressive deck. There are a lot of times, however, I do end up giving a shield token to an upgraded unit, as many decks, if they don't have blue in their deck, the only way they can deal with a unit is through damage, combat damage, or some sort of damage removal spell, damage-based removal spell, or you're playing yellow, so they can just bounce it to your hand, and, in that case, you might want to be paying attention to that, so shield tokens might not be super relevant, but at least for the aggressive decks, Sabine green, Leia red, Grand Inquisitor blue, usually they don't play anything with the exception of maybe Takedown. You can get your units outside of Takedown range, put a shield token on a unit, and keep it alive forever, which is crazy. 3 copies of the Force is with me. We have a lot of Force units in the deck, but this is also just a way to get 2 experience tokens to a unit and then attack with that unit to get in some value. You're most likely going to get a shield token on that unit as well. 2 copies of Vanquish. This gives us a nice little option against things like Avenger, things like Home 1, those big units that are kind of game enders. Vanquish deals with it and allows you to stay in the game. 3 copies of Protector. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the reasons why we were double blue. You might think this upgrade is a little unassuming, and I would say, generally speaking, it would be. However, the way this deck is constructed, we have a lot of Force synergies, we have a lot of upgrade power in the lightsabers, as well as things like the Forces with me. And because we are running Vigilance, even if we do get 2 for 1 in some cases, we do have some ways out. But for the most part, Protector is here because it's really powerful at stopping any sort of aggro or mid-range strategy, trying to get in some decent amounts of damage. If you put this on something like a Yoda, give it a shield token, maybe give it a lightsaber, suddenly they're dealing with, well, 2/4 with Jedi lightsaber becomes a 5/7, +1/+1 becomes a 6/8 with Sentinel, and it also can go out and attack and not take too much damage because of the -2/-2 from Jedi lightsaber. This card is really powerful, and I hope to showcase it a little bit in the latter games that we're going to be playing with this deck in some of the aggro matchups. 3 copies of Devotion just gives us something to restore 2 as a 2-costed upgrade, +1/+1. This goes really nicely on some sort of space units. We have a bunch of turn 1 space units in the deck. In fact, we have 6 of them, as they're mainly our sources of turn 1 plays. That's one of the reasons why Devotion is so powerful. If you get on a space unit, it's very hard to interact with, especially since if you have the initiative, let's say you play an Arc 170, you pass or you take the initiative after they play their unit, you get a Devotion down on it. It can't really be killed that following turn unless they have, some sort of actual removal spell. They can't like ECL it or trade it with a unit or something like that, which is where Devotion comes into play a lot. Lastly, to round out our upgrade and event package, we have 2 copies of Luke's lightsaber and 3 copies of Jedi lightsaber. Luke's lightsaber is specifically amazing on Luke. This is one of the ways where you can deploy Luke, get a Luke's lightsaber on him, and he becomes basically unkillable because he becomes a 7/8, gets a shield token, and heals any damage that they might have done to him. So unless he gets one shot, Luke's lightsaber is going to keep him alive. It's one of the reasons why it's in the deck, but it also works well on just any amount of our high toughness units. Basically, every unit that we have has higher toughness than it does power, and so putting a Luke's lightsaber on it is actually really relevant. Even though it's +3/+1, you really want that extra power. Then 3 copies of Jedi lightsaber. This is the one of the most common upgrades that we want in our earlier stages of the game. Putting this on an R2-D2 or a Yoda or a Kanan. these units really do change the game, especially in the aggro matchup, because they don't really have any way to deal with a massive unit like that. So 3 copies of Jedi Lightsaber to round us out. And let's move on to the ground units. So starting us off here, we have 3 copies of R2-D2. This is one of the best units to play on turn 1, as in the Luke deck. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of cards that you just want to play out, not necessarily trying to benefit from Luke's action to get the shield. R2 is one of those cards that you can just play out and get the shield token because it is a 1-costed unit. So you play this on turn 1, you get a little bit of deck filtering or top of your deck filtering, and you get a shield token, which basically means it's never going to die. 3 copies of Yoda. This is that nice 2/4 body with Restore 2. This is just an obnoxious unit against any aggro deck, as they really kind of have to deal with it because of the Restore 2, but you also get to draw some cards if anyone does deal with it. 3 copies of Kanan Jarrus. This is a really nice one, as well as it's a really nice statted unit that trades well with a lot of the other 4 resource plays that we see in the game, but it also gives you some additional healing on attacks, which is really, really nice. Also, both Yoda and Kanan are Force units, which is extremely, extremely important. 3 copies, or rather, 2 copies, I should say. 3 copies, rather. I'm mixing it up with Luke here. 3 copies of Obi-Wan Kenobi, a nice 4/6 Sentinel body to come down and give us a lot of pressure relief. This is one of those units where if you, let's say, deploy Luke, and they can't kill Obi-Wan immediately, you give it a shield token, and suddenly it's a massive problem to deal with, as it's a 4/6 Sentinel with shield, and they kind of just have to sacrifice units into it to get rid of this on the battlefield. And then lastly, 2 copies of Luke. That's one of the reasons why I was saying 2, 3. It's because you have 2 copies of Luke. Now, Luke isn't especially important, and I say that lightly, as he's an amazing unit, one of the most powerful cards in the game right now, but he isn't like the linchpin of our entire strategy. At this point, if you're fighting some mid-range style of decks, Luke comes down and he's really impactful. Kills a unit, is a 6/7, has Restore 3, can really give you a lot of game. But you don't necessarily need him in your hand. You don't need to rely on this card the entire way. Like, oh, I need to keep this Luke in hand. Just remember that, as a lot of people see this card and you're like, yeah, I need this card. But it's not necessarily the case. On another note, you can use Luke's lightsaber on the Luke Skywalker unit, not just the leader. So something to remember if you are somewhere in the game where you have a Luke's lightsaber and a Luke that's not the leader on the battlefield, that does come up every once in a while. Let's talk about our space units, as it rounds up a lot of our early drops and some of our late game plays. So over in the space arena, we are starting off with 3 copies of Restored Arc 170 and 3 copies of Alliance X-Wing. Mainly in blue, there are not a lot of blue/heroism turn 1 plays that are extremely, extremely good. You could look at like Guardian of the Wills, for example, which we do have in the sideboard, but something like that does die really easily and can kind of just get overrun. We want units that have reasonable ability to trade with enemy units and won't just die immediately. And Restored Arc 170 actually is one of the better turn 1 plays, especially in the aggro matchup, because that Restore 1 comes in massively throughout the game. And it's not too bad to play this on turn 2 after you've played another one or something else on turn 1, and to give it a shield token. It can be really, really good, especially against like ECLing Sabine decks, where they could ECL a Consortium Star Viper, kind of mess up your space plan, because he's got 3 toughness and 2 power. The shield really prevents that. 3 copies of System Patrol Craft. If you are in a position where there's a lot of space threat, this card comes in handy, as it just comes down, is a Sentinel, really, really relevant for any sort of situation where you need to protect your space. And lastly, we have 2 copies of Redemption. This is one of those cards where normally in your aggro matchup, you want to get to the later stages of the game. But if you're not playing blue, you don't have a lot of ways to actually survive the later stages of the game, because there's a lot of situations where they can just draw direct damage and kill you. Well, Redemptions, Vigilances, these are cards that help you just completely take you out of range and give you a nice option in the late game. That's where Redemption comes in, as it's not a card you want to play early, as you can't, right, or keep in your hand early. You want to wait till the later stages of the game, get this down, heal 5-6 damage, and then it's just a nice Sentinel body. Keep in mind, and a lot of people don't actually realize this, you can heal damage off of units as well. And while that might not seem extremely relevant, there are a lot of situations where I might be fighting a more mid-range or control deck, and healing damage off of my leader or some sort of sentinel is actually extremely relevant in this deck, so just keep that in mind. That's going to be the main deck. Let's talk about the sideboard, and let's run a few matches just to show you all the power of Bluke. I gotta admit, guys, the Bluke is not really working for me. I'm gonna refer to it as Blue Luke still. I said that and I was like, oh man, that just does, it sounds like barf, you know. Anyways, we have 3 copies of Guardian of the Wills in the sideboard. This is especially for certain matchups where you might be on the play, you might have initiative to start us out, and you play Guardian of the Wills, and then you have a nice upgrade in your hand that you can play on turn 2, something like a Protector, something like a Devotion, something like a Jedi Lightsaber, and you're able to play that and maybe another upgrade or another unit to go ahead and leverage the additional costs. One of the big things with Guardian of the Wills is that it dies almost immediately, because when someone sees you play this, they're like, oh, they're going to upgrade it. They're not playing this card in non-upgrade decks, right? So they want to kill it, and they're going to kill it because it's a 2/2. And so in your matchups where you know it's going to survive until tier 2, that's where Guardian of the Wills comes in. We have one more copy of Luke Skywalker in the sideboard as well. This card, again, is just a high value card and works and matches up really well against Vaders. So if your opponent's playing Vader, let's say they go ahead and play Vader, they kill something, and then they get another unit. Guess what? You play Luke, you kill their Vader or whatever they got, and now you're left with a 6/7, which trades really nicely with Darth Vader, as they probably already have some damage on it. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. That's usually the mid-range decks that we're looking at. One more copy of Restock. Again, we want some more game against those control matchups, as that's one of the harder matchups against our deck. One more copy of Make an Opening. Gives us a little bit nice removal spell in the matchups where someone's playing like a 7th Fleet Defender or a Crafty Smuggler or a Fallen Search, something like that, or Grand Inquisitor. This does work. Next up, we have 3 copies of Spark of Rebellion. I've talked a lot about this card. I think I made a whole video about it. I think you all saw. But this card is absurdly powerful in the control matchup. And this is the card, alongside our Restocks and Vigilances, that allow us to actually go in a long game and not actually be unfavored in that matchup. We can put some early pressure on, potentially, but this is a way to actually rip things like Restock or Vigilance out of our opponent's hand and then sit back and be our own little control deck. One more copy of Vanquish as well helps us deal with, again, some of those later game threats that might be coming out of mid-range and control decks, or even, you know, in some cases you just need to kill a Fet's Fire Spray and you gotta have a Vanquish for it. Sometimes that does come up. So pretty good stuff. And and with that, let's go ahead and dive into a couple of practice games or showcase games for you all, just to show you all the power of Blue Luke. Diving into our first match here, it looks like we're getting Sabine Yellow. Now, it's important to realize that Sabine Yellow does have potential to waylay something that we might have upgraded, but normally Sabine Yellow doesn't play those types of things. It plays maybe some copies of Shoot First, maybe many copies of Surprise Strike. Those are the cards that we have to worry about, and it is a more aggressive deck, so our space units aren't necessarily safe because of Millennium Falcon. So just a few things that we need to realize. This hand is pretty bad. We do have 9 turn 1 plays, so I'm hoping to find one, and it looks like we did, and this is a pretty reasonable hand. I'm going to keep the R2, and I will probably go ahead and resource a Redemption, as that's really, really late, as well as another R2. And we have a nice 1-2 punch. We can go R2, Shield Token, Jedi Lightsaber on turn 2, and basically everything that our opponents plays gets killed by our Jedi Lightsaber up R2D2, which is really, really nice. So this is exactly what I was kind of referring to earlier in the ability to, you know, kind of grow a unit outside of your opponent's range. Looks like our opponent's going in with the kind of flood the board type strategy, which does work decently well in some matchups, but I don't know if it's going to work super well against us in this game. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and resource the Restore Arc 170, as we have a lot of plays that we do want to make, and it looks like they're going to get in for some damage here. And we're going to do something pretty simple. We're going to equip our R2 with the Jedi Lightsaber, and we're going to go to town on their units. We're going to go ahead and equip the lightsaber over to R2. Now, it's important that's a 4/7. That is pretty relevant. It doesn't get the -2/-2, so we want to use the first attack wisely, as it is the attack with that shield. So we want to hit the highest powered unit, and that's going to be the Fleet Lieutenant. There's the forces with me. That card, I don't think is going to be extremely relevant in this case, specifically because we don't have any force units on the battlefield right now. Right now, we're just relying on this R2D2 to get us there. Here's an interesting one. We have a choice between resourcing System Patrol Craft, Devotion, or Make an Opening. Because Kanan's our only other unit, I want to keep it in hand just in case R2 decides to die or that gets killed or something like that. Vigilance is too important in this matchup. Heal 5, kill something is super, super relevant. So it's between System Patrol Craft, Make an Opening, and Devotion. And I think in this case, I actually don't think R2 is going to die that easily. And I want Make an Opening because it's going to go ahead and deal with that Spec Force Soldier. Now here, I am actually going to go ahead and Vigilance, heal, defeat the Spec Force Soldier. And that might seem a little counterintuitive, can't we just kill it with R2? Yes, we can, but they could play some 4 resource play that does have 4 toughness, such as like a K2SO, and I would love to deal with it. There's a Rogue Operative. That's exactly the type of card that I was kind of thinking of. There's a Takedown. I'm going to keep that on top as that can actually kill their Sabine Wren, assuming they don't have a Metal Ceremony. So we're going to go ahead and claim initiative here, and we're going to let them do their thing. They're probably going to hit with Sabine as per usual. They're going to maybe Metal Ceremony if they have it. Metal Ceremony would be pretty nice here, but it looks like they're just going to play out a Spec Force Soldier, and that's going to be the case of this game here. We drew an Obi-Wan, and that means I'm going to resource Kanan, as Obi-Wan is going to be a lot more important in this game, I think, than the Kanan, because we're going to want to deploy it next turn. And here, I'm just going to go ahead and take down the Sabine, get it off the battlefield so that we can't surprise strike and kill off one of our units. Here, they're going to attack with R2. That's totally fine. We're going to kill off the Spec Force Soldier, and there's a Yoda on top. I'm going to put that on bottom. It's not really relevant in this stage of the game, because we're going to play Obi-Wan next turn. They're going to for-cause us, and it dealt 4 damage, but if you look at our health right now, 10 HP. That's all the damage we've been dealt. That's because we had such a massive unit on turn 2 to kill off everything that they've played so far. Looks like that they've put 4 cards on top of their deck. So they had Sabine, Heroic Sacrifice, Millennium Falcon, and Green Squadron A-Wing. That's totally fine. We're going to go ahead and claim initiative. And we're going to go ahead and actually put down our Obi-Wan Kenobi this turn after we kill off R2D2. Actually, hold on. We want to deploy Obi-Wan first, as that is the card that we want them to potentially attack into. We know that they put 4 cards on top. I'm not sure in what order. I actually don't know how to tell on this program, but my guess would be that they put Millennium Falcon and Green Squadron A-Wing on top, so that they drew it so that they could play it this turn. Here, we do not care about R2 anymore, because we have Obi-Wan on the battlefield, and that gives us a huge game against these ground units. And here you could see they're going to go ahead and attack into our base here with Millennium Falcon. And if they take initiative, that's no problem. Or if they attack here, that's no problem. We're just going to claim initiative. It might seem counterintuitive to miss out on 4 points of damage, but there is still a way that they could potentially race us here. And so we want to keep up all of our HP as much as we possibly can, including, well, the 3 points of damage that we would take off the A-Wing the next turn if we didn't go ahead and Vigilance here. So we drew forces with me. Not like extremely massive here, so I don't really see a reason to kind of go ahead and keep that around. But also Protector doesn't look that great here either, because we already have the Sentinel body, and there's not really a good way for Sabine decks to deal with that. So we're just going to go ahead and defeat, heal the Green Squadron A-Wing, and I guess this is going to buy us a lot of time, because our opponent prioritized taking the initiative. Here we're just going to go ahead and apply a Devotion onto Luke, and that's going to give it Restored 2. So we basically negate any damage that we would have taken from the Millennium Falcon. And then they went ahead and conceded because they realized they have no way to get through Obi-Wan, especially with shielded every turn. We have Devotion. It's going to heal 2 every turn. And there you go. That's a perfect example against a pretty aggro deck in Sabine Yellow, and how massively favored we were basically the entire game. In our next match here, it looks like we got a double green Palp, which is going to be a pretty interesting matchup. I have actually not fought a double green Palp with this specific deck, well, it's not normal that you see it. They're definitely more of a mid-range style of deck, and unfortunately we drew a hand with no turn 1 plays, no turn 2 plays, and then we mulligan into another hand with no turn 1 plays and no turn 2 plays. We just have to keep and see what we can do. There's no real reason, I think, to keep around the Luke Skywalker at this point. And I do want to keep the Jedi lightsaber, but I think we could go ahead and resource the forces with me. This is a pretty unfortunate circumstance, as we have 9 turn 1 plays as well as several turn 2 plays. So not drawing anything and then drawing the other 2 Kanans is really just quite poor. This has been a really poor draw, but I guess, you know, that's sometimes that happens, right? We have many opportunities to kind of get some cards out there that would be pretty impactful. Unfortunately for us, we didn't see those cards, and we're just going to be pretty far behind at this point. We're going to get a Kanan down next turn, but there's a high possibility where they go attack your Kanan with Super Laser Tech, command, go ahead and, let's see. I think we resource the System Patrol Craft in this spot, but they go command, give 2 experience to Admiral Piet, and then ramp, and then just attack it Arcanon and get it killed here. They definitely should have attacked me for 1. Oh, they did. Okay, so they attacked me for 1. Makes sense. I didn't actually see them attack me for 1. There's the command. As I mentioned, they're going to put 2 experience tokens most likely, and then give a resource in play. And now we are really far behind, because we've done nothing turn 1, nothing turn 2, and now on turn 3, our turn 3 play is going to get immediately killed while they're ramping, doubly so, with Super Laser Technician. So this is going to be, okay, they made a mistake here. You can't deal damage yeah, so you can't deal damage because it's a unique unit. So they went for experience and resource. We get to go ahead and claim initiative. They're going to trade, you know, Admiral Piet plus Super Laser Technician for our Kanan Jarrus. Pretty simplistic here. Nothing too crazy. Oh, they're actually going to go ahead and attack base. And then they're going to attack Kanan. Okay. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable here. That is a play that you can make. Here is Protector, which could come in handy, but they may try to actually go ahead and use their palpability to try to steal Kanan from us. So that is something that we do have to kind of keep in mind. Now, what's interesting about this specific hand is I think that we want to keep Vigilance, as it's a pretty strong card. We want to keep the Restored Arc 170, make an opening plus Kanan can actually kill off Admiral Piet, which does look pretty appealing. And I don't necessarily want to put another upgrade on Kanan, because what can happen here is they can kind of keep him alive over the long course of the game, because he's already got damage on him. Next turn, they could just steal it with Emperor Palpatine, which looks pretty bad for us. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and get down an Arc 170 and see what they decide to do, as they can definitely trade with Kanan, but my guess is that they don't want to. Oh, they're just going to command it up. Okay. Yeah, that is perfectly reasonable. They can certainly do that. Double command, that is like really solid for our opponent. That is a really powerful draw for them, as command is one of the reasons why you're doing that. Looks like they're undoing their last action. Okay. Very strange from our opponent, to be honest. We're just going to go ahead and make an opening on their Piet, kill it off. Opponent probably, I don't know about, it's a little weird that they decided not to go ahead and, oh, they did resource. That's what I thought. They have 7 resources. I'm surprised that they didn't just go for the command resource, plus, you know, give experience. They claimed initiative. It's very weird. They're not doing anything with 7 resources. I wonder if it's just more reactive, or if they have some other thing that they could do. We need to be wary of this deploy from Emperor Palpatine. That is the card that we're really scared about, as deploying an Emperor Palpatine completely wrecks us if they have something really nice to steal. So we just have to make sure that they don't have anything really nice to steal. Looks like they're gonna put some experience tokens over on Colonel Yularen here, and we could get down an Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or we could just put a Luke Skywalker into play, give it Protector, give it a lightsaber, and see what we could do with that. And I think that's going to be the play, more so than getting an Obi-Wan on the field. Regardless, this allows us to pass action just to see what they are going to do. Looks like they claimed initiative. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and suit Luke up with a lightsaber here, and we're going to go ahead and kill off Colonel Yularen and give a shield token. It's really nice because the backside of this, well, you can't steal leader units with it, so it's not exactly super important that we, well, we have, a damaged Luke. So Protector here, I don't think it's necessary, as we have another Vigilance card in hand, and we can potentially protect her. Here, I think I'm going to get rid of the Obi-Wan, as, well, I mentioned earlier that we have another Sentinel card, but we also have Kanan plus Protector or Yoda plus Protector, and I think that that's going to be a little bit more useful for us, rather than playing a 6 resource play. What we don't want to do is deploy so many of our resources into one card and then have it get stolen by Palpatine. This is what we're trying to avoid right now, is get something stolen from Palpatine. That is exactly what we don't want to have happen here. Looks like they played a big boy here in Relentless. That is a huge card for sure, and is a little bit scary. But I think we're just going to go ahead and kill off their TIE Advanced. They can get down an Emperor Palpatine at this point. But we can actually not quite kill it. We're going to go ahead and Devotion up Luke. We're going to Protector up Luke. And we're going to go ahead and get down a Kanan Jarrus here. And just give a shield token to our Kanan so that we can protect him. So our opponents played this a little bit awkwardly. I'm not exactly sure what their plan here is. But it looks to maybe set up a nice steal with Relentless, or maybe an Overwhelming Barrage. If they have Overwhelming Barrage, they kill our Luke, and that's a shame, but there's not really too much that we can do about that necessarily. We have Make an Opening plus Vigilance. The question is, do we want to save both? If we save both, we can use Vigilance by sacrificing our event into Relentless. I think it's just better to get rid of this Make an Opening. And we're going to see what they have here. They could very well have, as I mentioned, that Overwhelming Barrage, which would work very nicely on this board, and that's exactly what they have. They're going to take down my my Luke here, which is very, very good for them. Or they might damage, some units here, but we're just going to get in for 2. And they're going to attack us for 10, probably. And we are definitely in a spot where we're struggling right now. The way this game went, if we had dropped a couple of early game plays, I think this game would have been pretty easy. But because we missed those first 2 turns, it's really, really brutal for us at this point. Looks like they're going to command again. A little bit strange to go ahead and command here. I guess they're trying to get some experience tokens. Maybe they're trying to, put in Piet so they can ambush something, or get back Piet so they can ambush something the following turn. But they're not really deploying Palpatine, which is a little bit weird to me, as I feel like they probably could have done some really nice stuff. They're going to try to experience and deal damage. They can only kill the Arc 170 right now. We're going to go ahead and attack in. And we're going to go ahead and play an Obi-Wan. And yeah, they could sack Relentless to kill or to steal Obi-Wan, which is something they could do. But I feel like that doesn't really solve a lot of things for them, so I think that it's better for them not to do that. Here I am going to resource the System Patrol Craft over the Yoda, because we have the ground arena pretty secure right now, and we could potentially do the Vanquish plus Vigilance combo to actually get one of our events through, which would be quite nice. And maybe they're relying on Relentless to close out the game, and so maybe we can do some pretty nice stuff there. Here I'm just going to immediately attack with Obi-Wan, as, well, assuming they don't kill it. I believe that they're going to go ahead and try to get rid of Obi-Wan here. So let's see what ends up happening. They need to damage something first. They can't immediately steal our Obi-Wan. Just to keep in mind. They could have another Overwhelming Barrage, and if they do, that's going to be huge for them. They do have another Overwhelming Barrage. So here, they probably go 5 Obi-Wan, 1 Kanan, as that's what I would do, in order to steal it with Emperor Palpatine. So they've had a great draw. They drew all 3 of their commands. Well, where's the other commands? Oh, they put commands into play as a resource. So they're gonna do 1 damage to Obi-Wan and then 5 damage to Kanan. That also works. And as well, it's going to be hard to get through that, and that's probably going to be the end of the game for us, because we don't really have a great option to kind of get through their Palpatine here, as they're just going to steal the Obi-Wan from us, and then we have to deal with both the Relentless and the getting through the Obi-Wan. So we're going to lose this one. We just had a pretty poor draw, but we actually almost made it through the entire game. There was one turn where I could have attacked their base, I think, instead of attacking one of their units. I think it was the Admiral Yularen. I don't know if that would have closed the game, as they would have healed a lot from that anyways. So, well, if we just went ahead and had a couple of early plays, I think that we would have closed out the game, but it was really close nonetheless. Here we are against a Luke mirror, except they are playing the more mid-rangey blue Luke green, and we are on the blue Luke here. This is a mediocre hand, not our greatest. Definitely had some awkward hands. We're going to keep it, and I'm going to resource a System Patrol Craft and a Forces with me. We have an Arc 170 into Devotion, which can do some pretty nice work here. I'm going to keep the Jedi Lightsaber in hand, as that's a really powerful card, and a card that you normally want to have if you have any other unit. They're going to go Alliance Dispatcher, which is a really scary unit, as they get to go ahead and basically cheat any card into play for a little bit of cost reduction. Fortunately for us, we drew a really, really nice answer to it in Make an Opening. That is one of the few answers that we can answer the Alliance Dispatcher with, and now they cannot get any cost reduction. So if they've played out their hand to try and leverage the cost reduction, they're going to be a little bit behind here. Unfortunately for us, it doesn't look like it did affect them all that much. Here, we've drawn into Protector and Vigilance, which is fine. We can go and resource the Protector, because the only unit we have right now is the System Patrol Craft, and there's no real reason to, put a Protector on a System Patrol Craft or anything like that. Here we have a Vigilance or a System Patrol Craft to deploy. I'm going to go ahead and just get more power out on the battlefield, as it's going to give us a little bit more value here. And we're going to go ahead and claim Initiative. Giving a shield token to Battlefield Marine doesn't really matter to us, especially with an Vigilance in hand. Here we have Devotion, we have Jedi Lightsaber. I think we actually at this point do resource the Jedi Lightsaber, because I think I'd rather go Devotion plus the Arc 170 in this case, in order for us to get a decent chunk of value. Let's go ahead and just attack in with the System Patrol Craft. It's important to realize that our opponent here actually has a 25 HP base. We can actually deal with what they're putting out pretty nicely here. We have all space units, and while that may not seem like that amazing for us, as well, they have a lot more power on the battlefield, we have ways to heal up, such as the Devotion, as well as the Restored Arc 170. So we actually have a really nice chance of racing our opponent here, as we have a decent chunk of damage here, and we have ways to heal. Following that up, we have Obi-Wan to deploy the next turn, which they basically have to deal with. So we're going to just immediately deploy Obi-Wan, and if they want to kill it, they have to go ahead and attack in with Luke or have some other way to kill it. And if they're going to kill it, boom, we get 2 experience on our space units, which are going to be pretty nice here. Looks like they have U-Wing reinforcements. This is one of those cards where it is going to be pretty powerful against us for sure. And let's see what they hit here. Right now, they need to hit some space units, so they could have like a Bright Hope, for example. Looks like they have a Bright Hope and a Fleet Lieutenant, so they can go ahead and attack in with Luke, give a shield token over to Bright Hope, and that's basically best case scenario in their spot. Wait. What happened there? Did they attack in? Where did their Homestead Militia here? Oh, they're going to return their Homestead Militia to hand. Okay. That makes a decent amount of sense here. Let's just go ahead and we have a shield token on the 2-3. I think we give the experience tokens to the what's it called? The Sentinel here. We're going to get Luke into the battlefield, and they're going to hit our Luke, but we're going to hit their base. There's not a huge reason to go ahead and hit, anything else, because we are in a racing scenario. And so we really just need to get in as much damage as we possibly can. And it looks like they're probably going to have to go ahead and kill off our Luke immediately. Here we have a takedown, we have an Obi-Wan. Takedown's looking pretty good. Protector is not, so I go ahead and resource that. And again, they're at 14 damage on their base, so we do actually have some really nice ways to kind of close out the game here. If they hit another Bright Hope, that would be a little bit unfortunate, or if they hit like another Ewing reinforcements, that would also be pretty good for them. But them bouncing their Homestead Militia back to hand, I don't think was a good play. Maybe they wanted to draw an additional card, but they, well, I don't know what they have in hand, but normally you want to keep that on the battlefield, especially for like that specific scenario. They would have saved 4 damage on their base. They would have gotten Homestead Militia kill, but that's okay. And then they would have also been able to do an additional damage to my Luke. Now that is a huge draw for my opponent. That's a home one. Fortunately for us, we have an Obi-Wan part 2. So this is going to allow us to potentially get some more value, as they're going to have to attack into Obi-Wan. And we're going to give 2 experience over to our Luke Skywalker or our System Patrol Craft. And we will go ahead and give it over to our System Patrol Craft, as that's going to be a way that we can go ahead and, well, close out the game by potentially giving an experience token over to the, what's it called? Shield token over to one of our space usage trading with Homewood. However, they're going to go up to 15 here with the Restore, and we have, well, enough damage to close out the game. So we're going to close out the game. There's no real reason to do anything else. Then that's going to be game. So we went through a home one and a Ewing reinforcements with this deck because of all of our upgrades and the things that we were able to leverage here against our opponent. The make it opening was extremely crucial in making sure that they didn't get to deploy home one on turn 6 instead of the Ewing reinforcements. So that was a really good game, and it kind of showed both strengths of both decks. Luke Green got to deploy those Ewings, those home ones, which we don't really have, but then we have a lot more healing and ways to race because of that healing, right? Devotion made it a huge problem for our opponent. If we didn't have things like Devotion or the Arc 170s in the air or things like that, we would not have been able to race our opponent. And that was a really nice showing. Let's go into the final game of today. On to match number 4, I believe. Is this 4 or 3? I don't even remember. I think this is 4. Anyways, we're going to keep this hand. This is a very good hand. We're going to go to resource the Luke's Lightsaber and the X-Wing. Looks like we're against another Sabine Yellow. This is a very popular deck as of late. A lot of people view this as up there with Sabine Green. I'm not quite on that page, but I do think it is a very powerful deck, and it is that aggro deck that I was kind of looking for to fight. This is a pretty nice hand. It's not amazing, but it is pretty good. Here we're going to go ahead and resource the forces with me. And I'm just going to immediately deploy Yoda, as if they go ahead and use like a Fleet Lieutenant, for example, here, and they kill my Yoda, that's like fine. But normally they just go ahead and, you know, maybe if they don't have it, for example, well, looks like they do have it, which is a little unfortunate for us. But we're gonna go to claim initiative here. If they do have it, then they could go Fleet Lieutenant or Yoda. If they don't have it, then we can go ahead and just take initiative after they go ahead and play a play, which is gonna be pretty relevant for us. Here, same thing goes. We're just gonna go ahead and play a Kanan. And the reason why we're trying to get our units out is if we get one turn, just a singular turn with one of these units, we can start suiting it up massively with Jedi Lightsabers, Devotion. We also have a Vigilance in hand, which is going to be huge. And look at that. What a play. They have Wing Leader for Fleet Lieutenant to potentially go ahead and kill off our Kanan Jarrus here, which is pretty nice for them. But we do have somewhat of an answer here. There's going to be Sabine deployed. That is huge for our opponent. We got to make it opening. We have a Vigilance in hand. Okay, let's go ahead and just resource this System Patrol Craft. Let's go ahead and Vigilance plus R2 here. So we're going to go ahead and kill off Fleet Lieutenant. Heal, defeat, kill off Fleet Lieutenant. And then we're going to go ahead and R2. And then that should be able to trade with Sabine here, which is going to be quite nice. And you can see how powerful something like a Vigilance is. I'm going to go to bottom that make an opening. We already have one in hand, but also we're really looking for the cards like Vigilance, for example. I'm going to get in for 2 points of damage. I didn't do previous turns because it was more important to avoid damage. But here, this allows us to really go ahead and just poke in for damage because they're going to have another play here, which is pretty relevant. Looks like we drew another Devotion, which is huge. And we also have a System Patrol Craft. So the question is, do we want this make an opening? And I think the answer is we actually don't want the Jedi lightsaber in this specific spot. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off the turn with a System Patrol Craft. My bad, the recording cut out there for a second. We can't attack Sabine. I just remembered here at the beginning of the turn because I tried to attack it, but it's not possible because, well, she can't be attacked because of 3 unique aspects, which is pretty relevant here. We're gonna go ahead and get a Luke Skywalker out here, and they don't have like Steadfast Battalion to worry about, and it looks like they are going to bamboozle. Okay, not a bad card from our opponent. We're gonna go ahead and get a devotion over on Alliance X-Wing here, just to get some little bit of extra damage and healing done, which is gonna be quite nice. And they can potentially attack System Patrol Craft, return it to hand, replay the Millennium Falcon, and attack it again, so they don't have to trade. But this is going to work out decently well. Looks like they're going to attack exactly as we thought. And we're going to go ahead and attack 3 into their base. They're going to play a For a Cause I Believe in. And it looks like they're going to get some damage into our base. Let's see how much. Bamboozle is not a card I would have expected. Not a card I would have expected. They have Real's Rogue Operative Change of Heart. Change of Heart is going to be brutal. Very brutal for us. We're going to claim initiative here. So Change of Heart, they can potentially go ahead and Change of Heart the System Patrol Craft. Or the Alliance X-Wing. I think in this specific spot, we just want to go ahead and, wow, that's a lot of devotions. And I think we actually do want them, because we can suit up both devotions over on Luke. But they're going to bounce, interesting, they're going to bounce their Millennium Falcon to hand. So this is really, really interesting, as they could potentially take my Alliance X-Wing, and we wouldn't get the heal too. But killing off R2-D2 and putting a shield token on System Patrol Craft looks pretty appealing. Question is, do I want to attack him with X-Wing or, attack him with R2-D2? They have Change of Heart here. So they can play Change of Heart. I believe they put a card on top of their deck. They can play Change of Heart. They can steal like System Patrol Craft or X-Wing. If they steal System Patrol Craft, they hit our base for 3 plus 3. And that's not enough. They probably steal X-Wing so they can get rid of the devotion. And I think that's okay. I think I would just rather go ahead and keep my my damage very low. So with their Change of Heart here, they probably take the X-Wing. Even though it's not hitting the base, they don't get the heal. Yep, that's exactly what happened. And here, it's pretty simple. We just go ahead and make an opening our own System Patrol Craft, just to go ahead and heal essentially 3 damage from our base. So here we just go in with the devotion, hit, boom. And now we devotion up Luke, and we hit into Sabine Wren and give a shield over to X-Wing. So now we're in a really, really nice spot, as we have all the devotions we could ever want. And we are healing up a huge chunk. So my guess was that they were going to go System Patrol Craft. And that's mainly because they want to get in for damage on the base. I don't think they should return their Millennium Falcon. By doing that, they kind of lost out on a lot of damage. And now we're in a really good spot because we have a total of Restore 6 every single turn, which is really, really crazy. And one of it's on the leader, which is basically uninteractable at this point. We're just going to go ahead and attack their base. As we are now restoring 1,000,000 HP, and there's no real reason to, not do that. Let's go ahead and attack into R2. They're trying to undo their wing leader because they thought they could wing leader their Millennium Falcon, I'm guessing. Yeah, you can't undo it at this point. You've played it out, and okay, they conceded. Okay, GG. They probably weren't winning that game anyways because we had Restore 6 on our units. But there is kind of the reason as to why you play Blue Luke is against these aggro matchups. You have main deck Devotion, main deck Make an Opening, main deck Protector, and things like that to prevent damage. We didn't really see Protector pop off in any of these games, but we did get to see the power of, well, Devotion, which I'm sure all of you know at this point, the power of a Jedi lightsaber, and the power of Luke's lightsaber. and of course, just all the random units that we are running. I think that Palpatine game that we did lose, that was just a really, really miserable couple of hands. The fact that we didn't get, well, if I pop open the deck list here, the fact that we didn't get, let me just go to the main menu here so we can look at the deck list. If we go ahead and make a private game with Blue Luke, the fact that we did not draw any of our, well, R2s, we had no Yodas, we had no Restored Arcs or X-Wings. That is a total of 12 different units that we can play in the earlier stages of the game, and we didn't draw any of them, which is a little unfortunate. But that does happen with this deck, as we are upgrade focused, and sometimes we rely on making openings or things like that to kind of get us through the early game, or something like that. You do want an early game unit, and sometimes it doesn't pop up, but some of those upgrades get us the long way, and in the control matchup, sometimes those upgrades can be a little bit of a downside, but you can sometimes sneak a win out with Vigilance and Vanquish. I apologize to not get you a control matchup today, but sometimes people are just not playing the control matchup. That is our weakest matchup. Don't get me wrong. It's one of the reasons why we have multiple cards dedicated in the sideboard to that control matchup, including the 3 Spark Rebellions and the Restock. But, well, you have a really good game against the aggro matchup, really good game against the mid-range matchup, and you saw it here with all of the varying different matchups that we fought. Double Sabine yellows, we fought a Luke green and a Palpatine green. Against Boba Green, we do struggle sometimes if they have the waylays or the proper interaction, but sometimes they just don't have it, and sometimes you can just drop devotions and lightsabers on your Luke, and it's just not possible for them to get through. Or you could just play the more controlling route, like Naked Opening is really good against Crafty Smuggler, Takedowns are really good against Bobas, Vanquishes also pretty good in that matchup, even though it can be a little bit slow. Lukes are one of the really big game changers in the matchup as well, so just some things to consider as you're going through and trying to figure out, you know, what game you want to play against certain decks. And hopefully you all enjoyed. It's pretty strong, I will admit. I've been doing pretty well with it. Of course, it's not great. It's not tier 1 by any means, but it will get you a few wins, perhaps at your local game store. Thanks for watching, everyone. And again, if you want to pick up any of the cards here on the video, go ahead and use that link in the description. There's a deck list and a link to the TCG player link. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all for the next.